Hello, my name is Jeremy. This is Red Means Recording, and today I want to talk to you about some new plugins from Focusrite and Sonible. They are a collaboration between the two groups, and they are the fast plugins. And the reason that I want to talk to you about these is because Focusrite reached out and wanted to show me that these were coming out and talk to me about them. And the first thing I noticed when I was looking at these was like, whoa, these are really cool for people who are trying to better understand what things like EQs and compressors do. There's some really valuable information in the way that these are presented. I really like the way that they show off things that I've been teaching in my lessons about using EQ and compression, which are two kind of like main parts of mixing. Generally with EQ, I'm always showing people like pictures of like this Sweetwater frequency chart thing. I'll put it on screen. Like, it's like, hey, here's the frequencies for these things, and here's kind of what they describe, like the brightness of a snare, that kind of stuff. That's really, really good information to have. And the fast equalizer is a really quick way to kind of get in there with stuff to check that out. So we're looking at the equalizer. The fast compressor is a really awesome visual way of showing how compression works. Compression being a dynamic process that reduces dynamic range and shapes transients in your material, the shape of how volume works in all kinds of material. So we're looking at those two, and the fast reveal plugin, which isn't quite so much as an educational tool, but more so a kind of magic behind the scenes. Let's unmask some frequencies and maybe getting a shortcut to certain things sticking out in our mix and making them work together a bit more, which is sort of that ineffable mix thing. So none of these are magic bullets. None of these are going to like solve world hunger, but they are really, really nice visual tools that work very well and teach as they go along. And I think that's really, really important. Full disclosure, Focusrite is sponsoring this video, but I was the one that initiated this process because I really wanted to share these tools with you. As an educator, I think they are just really, really cool. So let's get into it, and we'll start off with the equalizer. So welcome to the Fast Equalizer. We can resize this window, which is wonderful. We'll be working with some vocals from my track Slow Down. Slow down, slow down. Oh, it's just fucking beautiful, isn't it? So what is equalization? Equalization is the process of adding or removing frequencies from a piece of audio. And depending on the audio, it will have a different effect. The first thing, when this is in universal mode, we already get these bands broken up for us, so we can start to understand that there are sections in the EQ, sections in the EQ spectrum that we can reach for when we want to do things. We're going to start in fast mode, and we are going to hit learn. And I'm going to first show you what universal is like, and then we're going to dive into like one of these individual presets for like vocals and stuff like that. So, slow down, slow down. Gonna keep on, keep on. All right. In universal mode, it's going to identify sort of these individual bands, and you can see that we can just reach for these and grab them like this. So let's listen to what these are going to do. Slow down. Gonna keep on, keep on. Keep on, slow down, slow down. We can solo each individual band, which gives us really instant feedback into exactly what's happening here in either our mix or an individual instrument. I use the Multiband Dynamics plugin from Isotope Ozone to do this, and I find it to be an extremely revealing thing. You're like, oh yeah, what's actually living in that band? What is important to the sound in that band? And what happens when I attenuate it or bring it up? You can see down here we have a high pass filter, which is really useful for cleaning up things so they don't interfere with your low end. And that's one of the keys to getting a good big mix is to clean things out with EQ that don't belong in there. Let's go ahead and go into vocal, and we'll call this a vocal high, and let's relearn and see what happens. Slow down, slow down. Gonna keep on, keep on. All right. So instead here of having the low, sub, mid, high, we now have words that indicate different parts of the vocal. So the body of the vocal, nasal, the presence, also known as clarity. This is where a lot of the sort of like enunciation and like where actually humans are super, super keyed into these frequencies right here. These are really important. And then sibilance, that kind of sound, where also air and sparkle is. So let's check out some of these. We're in the neutral profile over here. If I change these, I'll automatically get a bit of adjustment to these. So bright increased the presence in the sibilance, dropped the nasal down, didn't do anything to the body really. Warm's going to increase this area right here and drop this area. So this is also a really good tool. What does it mean to make a vocal more warm? What does it mean to make a vocal more bright? Well, you can look right here. You'll also notice that we have a cut in all of these. And that's, again, an important part of getting a clean mix, is doing these sort of like high pass filter kind of things. So let's check out just real quick what the difference between these three profiles sounds like. Slow down, slow down. Gonna keep on, keep on. Keep on, slow down, slow down. So pretty different in the profiles. And it's if you're looking at the word that's there, like warm, neutral, bright, and you click it, and it becomes very clear that that is indeed what is happening when it changes these things. Increasing body increases the warmth. Dropping these downs increase the warmth. Managing the sibilance and presence up here will increase brightness. And you can choose whatever combination of these you want. Slow down, slow down. If you want a big body full thing with more brightness, you can do that. You can see that we have these sections, body, nasal presence. These have a sort of width to them on the scale. And it's not super apparent from here, but that's basically what's called the band Q. This Q, the resonance of the band. Here's that band right there. You can see it. And if I change the Q on it, I will change the width of that band. The cool thing about the fast equalizer is that it doesn't really, reset this. Boop. It kind of deobfuscates that. So if you're just looking to make some changes like this, as somebody who may not know exactly what to reach for when it comes to adjusting these types of parameters for different types of audio signal, then this makes it really easy to do that. And as somebody who may be learning how to mix, this is a really, really, really invaluable tool. Like starting to get an easy to understand direct way of affecting your signal with these tools like EQ and Compressor. So, once you've done that, you can still see in the detailed thing here that you have access to these bands here. You can still see what they do, but you also have access to these bands here. So you can do stuff in between and then, bring it back here and, you've got that dip right there. So that's really, really cool. So I've put the fast EQ on electric guitar. It's distorted electric guitar. Let's hit learn and see what we get from this. So you can hear it already made a bit of an adjustment. Let's go ahead and check out warm, neutral, and bright. And then we can make the adjustments ourselves. So again, like here are the sort of main components of like electric guitar. And body gives us that warmth that we were looking for. So just a really, literally fast way of getting in and adjusting the main components of an instrument. I think it's really cool. So I'm going to suggest the fast EQ to anybody who maybe isn't super, super great at mixing yet, but they want to learn and they want to get in and start to make meaningful adjustments to their tracks and also learn where parts of instruments live, because that's super, super important. All right, let's talk about compression. Compression is the idea of dynamic range control, meaning that you are going to make loud sounds quieter and you're going to make quiet sounds louder. Compression is generally used to reduce the dynamic range of a signal. You can see in our waveform here, these vocals, that I have a pretty dynamic performance in that there's a lot of difference between the peaks and the quiet parts. And compression can help me even this out quite a bit. So that's one tool. You can also manage the attack and release characteristic of things by compressing based on a certain time frame. Let's go ahead and use this real quick on a vocal setting, and we can talk about the tools of a compressor. Slow down, slow down. Gonna keep on, keep on. Gray represents our original signal, and the red represents our compressed signal. Over here, you can see we have gray meters for input, and we have red for gain reduction. As we lower the threshold, we compress the signal. And one of the really cool things about this compressor is how it shows you in the red, the waveform, exactly what the compression's doing to not just the level of compression you're getting, but also the way that compression is affecting the transients. So for instance, right here, you see in this part that's going by right there, how the transient looks different than it does up here. The transient being the spike there at the beginning. So really awesome visual reference to how compression works. And of course, you still have these options right here to choose. So under the hood, if we hit detailed, we'll see that the control that's happening here is a combination of ratio and threshold. That's how compression works. You set a threshold. That's the point at which the compression starts. So here's our threshold, zoopity boop boop. And then ratio is how much the signal is attenuated once it goes over that threshold. And that's this part right here. In fast, it combines those two controls. It was actually a pretty classic way of doing it. Some really famous limiters do it this way as well. Down here you have things like attack, which is, you can see that, isn't that cool? Look at that yellow. The attack of the signal. What will we do to the attack of the signal if we turn this compression all the way down to starting at 0 milliseconds? We'll let part of the attack through, and then we'll start compression after that. So you can see I'm already reshaping my vocal with 0 milliseconds of attack. Same thing with release. If we turn the release all the way up, we're going to have compression that goes all the way through. And if our release is at 0, then the compressor will release its compression the moment that we pass back through the threshold. So lots of really, really awesome control right here. Spectral balancing is some stuff that's happening behind the scenes, where basically the compressor is looking at the frequencies involved in the signal and making decisions about doing some like multiband compression in the background to help make the compressor more transparent, which is pretty damn cool. Let's go into universal, hit drums. You can see we can choose individual parts of drums, so this might be kind of cool to try just on a kick or snare. But I think drums are a really cool visual way to see how compression works, because compression is such a big part of making drums sound a certain way. All right, so gray, original signal, and then red is my compressed signal. A hard compression on these drums just shaves off all that initial transient information. Now, because drums are inherently transient, they have a spike to them that makes our body and our ears react to them, and that's how they fit in the mix. Then, this may not be the amount of compression you actually want. But we can go to like hard and then go into detail and adjust our attack to let a little bit of that transient back through if we want, or a lot. It's up to us. Like, we have control over it, and we can see very, very quickly like how it's affecting our signal, which is really, really cool. Fast compressor, really, really awesome way to start understanding visually what compression is doing, marrying your eyes and your ears together so that you can not only get the result that you want, but also understand exactly what's happening so that, even in the future, if this isn't the tool that you decide to use for compression, you remember what compression does. You understand what those meters are doing. You understand what ratio and threshold and attack and release are going to do. Again, like, amazing learning tool. I just think it's really, really cool. Learn. And I'll go to our detailed, and we have let's turn off the auto makeup gain here. All right, let's A/B what this sounds like. So here's our affected signal right now. And let's go ahead and turn it off. Pretty big difference. much more present, both in frequency response and volume. And really, those are the two things that you're working for in your mixes. You're working with frequencies and you're working with amplitude and how those things all fit together in relation to each other. And that brings us to the last but not least plugin in this, and that's Reveal. Okay, so we've covered EQ and compression, two of the main tools that you'll use when you are mixing things. And you'll be using those to basically put every frequency and every bit of amplitude in its place. You can get a big full mix or a delicate mix, whatever kind of mix you're going for. One of the things that you can run into when you are mixing is this concept of masking, where one thing masks another thing, and it's hard to hear something. And you can bring that up with amplitude. You can try boosting frequencies or cutting frequencies. You can try sidechaining, which is a really classic way of dealing with like kick and bass stuff, where the bass gets out of the way when the kick hits so that the low frequency stays clean. Fast Reveal aims to try and use sort of like a spectral analysis to basically do fancy side chaining. So let's check it out on a bass and kick, or bass and drums, excuse me. So I'm gonna hit learn here. I have the kick going into the bass as a sidechain signal, and you can see that here with the green. There's my kick. So we have 0% ducking set right now. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slowly start turning this up, and we're gonna hear the Fast Reveal getting rid of frequencies that fight the kick drum. Let's go ahead and mute the rest of the drums so this is really easy to hear. So in this mode, you can hear all of the frequencies of the bass whenever the kick hits. But this starts shaving the low end off of the bass so that it doesn't interfere with the kick drum, but it leaves the top frequencies. So it's sort of like a spectral sidechain, which is pretty freaking cool. If you go into detailed here, you can change the precision, which is always probably good to turn it up, and then the speed. One thing to consider when you are sidechaining things like kick and bass is that the speed at which the sidechain releases is actually a really, really big part of the musicality of a sidechain, and it's probably the same here too. So you'll want to be choosy about that stuff. It's not really like the detailed thing here is actually really useful to use, and you can adjust the frequency range too, which is pretty freaking cool. So again, think of it as a spectral sidechain. So this is one example, and let's go ahead and get our full mix back. Let me show you what happens when you send an entire vocal into an instrument bus. So getting vocals to sit right in a mix is a pretty big deal. Obviously, you want them to feel like they're part of the music, but you also want them to be forward, and depending on the kind of mix that you're doing, sometimes they're super forward, like pop music and stuff like that. So when you're mixing, you're always considering like, how am I going to place the vocal in things in the space that I'm creating? How are the other instruments going to interact with it without making everything feel too isolated? All that kind of stuff, and it's really dependent on a per mix thing. EQ and compression will get you really, really far. But in this case, I have all of our instruments here. Let's go ahead and listen to the full mix real quick.
It was one morning where you came to me, all you brought grace and champagne. You wanted to drown all the pain. You said next you held my hand. We talked about everything. It was another fun game. I told you just to play.
Okay, so we're going to focus on this big chorus part. I've deliberately tried to throw as much stuff in here as I possibly could. I have a copy of the vocal going into the channel here in Ableton that is our instrument group. So this is our instrument group. It has guitars and chords. I tried to fill it up big and wide. So this instrument group has an instance of fast on it, and we are sending a copy of the vocals into it basically as a sidechain. So that you can see how this is routed in Ableton. It's like, let me see this. Instruments, bus, and then sidechain fast. So let's go ahead and relearn this real quick. All right. Let's listen to what happens when I start turning this up. So what's happening here? Well, it analyzed both the vocal and the entire instrument bus, and it's applying a spectral sort of like ducking to give the vocals presence. And I'm showing you like it on a really, really heavy amount here, but you can imagine that if you just kind of dial this in a little bit, it would probably take, in some cases, it's the difference between like, man, I don't really know how to fix this part of the mix to, oh, okay, now it actually hits like it's supposed to. Again, I'm not going to call this like a magic bullet or anything like that, but I do think it's a really, really cool and a fast way to create contrast in a mix. I prefer actually the EQ and compressor out of these three tools, but I think all of them are really, really interesting. And this one is sort of like a just sort of like magic helper kind of thing, where the other two I think are more educational. So as of the time of this recording, to get these plugins, you go to collective.focusrite.com. As also at the time of the recording, I believe the only way to get these is to, they have like a monthly payment thing. It's kind of like that lease to own thing that Splice was doing. I think it's like $5 a month as the time of this recording. I would love to see these available for purchase outright. I'd love to see education pricing on these, because I think these are incredible tools for people that are trying to learn how mixing works. I think they're a great way for teachers to show people how mixing works. And I would love to see them get in more circulation in that respect. Kudos to Sonible and Focusrite for these collabs. I think it's really, really, really cool. It's probably the first like powered by AI plugin that I have actually like really, really enjoyed. You know, a lot of the times you got these plugins and things that claim that, you know, they're doing AI stuff, and you'll hit a button and then something will happen, and then like you won't know what it is. Like the mix will sound different, but you'll be like, why did you make that decision? I find that with like the EQ and the compressor that it's clear why the decision was made, and then you are empowered as an individual with the information you're given on screen to go and make additional choices that suit your mix better. So I think that's great. I think it's really, really awesome. That's my pitch on that. Thanks for watching. I hope this was cool. Check out collective.focusrite.com if you want. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Beans Recording, and I hope you have a very wonderful day.